when you're dealing with accountability, do degrees of harm make a difference? I'm Kathy Bartoli from theintimacydojo.com, and I'm here with Victor Salmon from victorsalmon.com, who has an amazing accountability process set up before anyone's come and said, hey, you've done wrong, which I think is, I love the thought and care you've put into this. And one of the things I've struggled with is I'm a sexual abuse survivor. I've done a lot of healing. I really genuinely care about not harming others. And for me, I think that I struggle with the degree of harm that's done and the restorative process. Sometimes it occurs to me that it's like I'm in the Starbucks line. This is my silly analogy to I'm not trying to degrade in any way the experience people have. But if I'm in the Starbucks line waiting for coffee and I'm half awake because I haven't gotten my coffee yet, and I step on someone's toe by accident,
sure.
It sometimes feels like I have to cut my leg off at the knee to be restored. Or the process of, as opposed to, oh, I'm sorry, I'm not going to repeat it. Now, if I do it 20 times, stomping on people's feet regularly, I agree that I should not be in that line. Like but it just, I struggle a little bit with the degree of harm that was actually done in the incident, the intention that was genuinely there, and the amount of restorative process that is needed. And I'd love to know your thoughts.
That's an incredibly challenging question, because when we as people in positions of power, seeing as we're both up here talking, step on someone's toe, our experience may be I stepped on this person's toe, but it's so hard to know what that person's experience of that situation was.
Yeah.
And I think being willing to part with the one truth of what happened and just listen and be amenable to hearing like how much harm was done and what do they think is reasonable for restorative justice, and having a good accountability process or accountability pod that has criteria just based on a set of values of what they want for the community, what the community wants. You put together a charter of values or a code of conduct, and then you put together criteria for your accountability process, and then degrees of harm are kind of figured out, or a lot of the time you hear with accountability process these fears of, well, what happens if I do something very small, or if I have an X and I haven't done anything and they put me through this ringer of this long accountability process. I think the key with accountability processes is, again, acknowledging of the indigenous cultures and other marginalized cultures, anarchist societies, etc., that have helped develop all the literature on these processes. If we understand the context it came from, it's easier to understand how to implement it well, because there are so many pitfalls around accountability processes that make them just not work.
Yeah.
So I guess to your original question about if I step on someone's toe and I do a little bit of harm, how do I stop there from being this like huge amount of accountability? Mm-hmm. I think having flexibility built into your accountability process is number one.
Yeah.
How do you have flexibility so that someone can report, I got my foot stepped on and I think I've seen that same person do it before, or maybe I've just seen there's been a rash of foot stomping.
Yeah.
And I'm really sick of these foot stompings, and it always tends to be older white gentlemen on younger people of color, and that needs to end. There need to be no more foot stompings, not again to trivialize those vectors of privilege, power, and oppression, because they're quite serious when you actually apply them to real situations.
Absolutely, yes.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, it comes back to, okay, so is this person perceiving a lot of harm, and if so, what are the harmful behaviors that my coach is going to be, or that my accountability pod is going to be looking for in my behavior? So if someone accuses you, quote unquote, falsely of all of these egregious behaviors, they're just putting these behaviors almost onto a watch list for that accountability process or that accountability pod.
Rather than making it like this, okay, we're going to dive in and eradicate this from your system. We don't actually know that this is part of what your pattern is.
Yeah, and one, it's about being aware of our own vectors of harm. How do we normally cause harm? Because everyone is at least a little bit harmful.
We're humans. We walk around and
Yes, it doesn't have to be hell as other people, bad. It can just be, we're humans and we're at least a little bit harmful. So it comes back to like, how does an accountability process watch for harmful behaviors in people? And when someone reports falsely or otherwise all of these egregious behaviors, there's no reason to panic. It comes back to, okay, I'm going to be watched for these egregious behaviors. And if I'm already a person who does not commit those behaviors, I don't really have much to worry about. Ultimately, the process is not a punitive process. accountability processes are about rehabilitation. I mean, again, they can be punitive. They can be extrajudicial punitive processes. In my experience, that's a major pitfall and a way you do not want to go with them, because all accountability processes rely on the authority of the community. And ultimately, if someone's really egregiously a predator, all they have to do is say, you know what, I'm just going to cut all my ties with the community, move into a separate community, and just start causing harm there.
Yeah.
And ultimately, that process serves a very small function of just trying to keep your little corner of human civilization slightly more free from harm. And that's a great goal. And in addition to that, we can do a lot more.
Yeah.
That's why I think it's a pitfall. So if you move away from that punitive approach and you move into how can we facilitate growth? How can we make this an opportunity, even if it's one where we acknowledge that both parties or all parties are suffering quite a lot? How do we hold space for all of these different perspectives on that toe stomping? Like, how do we facilitate growth?
That's beautiful. I so appreciate that. Are there any specific things that you've done to incorporate flexibility into your accountability process? Like, I think that's like, oh yes, I would love to have flexibility in there where we're not like, you have a report, you must spend a year doing this thing.
Right. You must step down from educating. You must spend a full year, saying, I mean, I don't want to make this religious, but saying X number of Hail Marys, et cetera, whatever punitive sort of, here's how you pursue redemption. Yes. Instead of having a one-size-fits-all process, which, to be honest, even accountability processes should not be one-size-fits-all. Even accountability pods should not be one-size-fits-all. You don't necessarily have to engage all 3 members of my accountability pod in a process if you want to report harm. You can submit it anonymously on a form, /reports. You can submit it through just the liaison, right? You can just talk to the liaison. Here's an anonymous report. I'm not interested in pursuing the formal process, but I wanted to feel heard and I wanted to make sure this got back to Victor. Easy as pie.
Yeah.
Then you don't have to be marred by being involved in a process as a reporter or even as a survivor if it were sexual assault.
Yeah, because there's a lot of emotional labor in reporting something and then dealing with it afterward. And I know there's days when I feel like I can handle it, and other days I'm like, no, I just need to go hide in my closet for a little while.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and of course, once you report in a non-anonymous fashion, you may have those friends or well-meaning members of the community that say, you've got to take this further, you've really got to push this. There are all these people who weren't willing to do the emotional labor, therefore you must do the... It's like, oh goodness.
Yeah.
So I understand how important anonymity is, but that's partly how I build in flexibility, is allowing this this sliding scale of engagement is what I'll call it for now. It's the ability to say, I have one spoon to give, and I will huck it at you and run the other direction. I'm not interested in doing more. These other spoons are my spoons. You are not welcome to these. Like, being able to be protective of the resources that really you need to heal or that you need to just take for you.
Yeah. Oh, that's beautiful. Brilliant. Thank you. I have a couple other challenging questions. I'd like to come back and do another video on those. And if you'd like to support Victor's work, please go to patreon.com/victorsalmon.com or /victorsalmon. Yes. And Victor, thanks so much for what you're contributing here. I love the thought process and the being willing to share the vulnerable, like, hey, we're figuring this out, and this is what I've come up with so far. So.
Yeah, it's a huge challenge. I'm just glad that it's useful to some people, and thank you so much for the time and exposure and such.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, we'll come back in just a few minutes.
Bye.